Okay. Out of respect for your time, we're going to get started right away. And I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight. All we can ask in terms of this referendum is that the people that vote have the proper information and have all the information they need to make their vote. The focus of the meeting tonight is sharing the results of the referendum survey, sharing some foundational information about the financial situation of the district, answer your questions, and get additional feedback. We do want to be clear, perfectly clear about one thing. The board has not made a decision yet as to whether or not we're going to have a referendum in November. We know that there was a lack of community engagement prior to the April 2nd referendum question being decided, with some community members wishing that there were more opportunity for discussion and changes to the proposal before it was finalized, and others being unaware of the referendum at all. We are committed to doing things differently this time. The survey results and what you share during these meetings will help inform us as we try to find a solution that meets the needs of our students, our taxpayers, and our community. We are so grateful to you for your willingness to work with us at this incredibly important time for our students and our community, as well as our school district. At this time, I want to introduce Superintendent Aaron Tarnitzer. He'll be our facilitator for the meeting this evening. Once again, thank you so much for your attendance, and we'll speak again a little later.
Excellent, thank you. That's Craig Howry, our board president. We also have Megan Chapman, another board member. Stand up and wave, Megan, who's also here. Thank you. And Bruce Fisher, another board member who is joining us today. So very important that you're here. My name is Aaron Tarnitzer, and I get to be the superintendent here in the McFarland School District, starting my 3rd year as a superintendent and my 18th year in the district. Really an honor to be here, and so glad that you are here, both those of you that were able to join us in person and those of you that are watching virtually online, either live or recorded. So we want as many people as possible to hear this information and be a part of providing feedback to us as we contemplate how to address our budget needs. I also wanted to recognize that we do have Matt Schenke here, village administrator is here, so thank you, Matt, for attending. Matt wanted to make sure I let you know that he is here and will stick around afterwards to answer any questions you may have about the village. And so those village-related questions, of course, that's not the focus of our meeting tonight, but in our continued partnership with the village, wanted to show that we are here to learn and collaborate together, and he's available for questions afterwards as well. Importantly, I am just the host, the MC. I will be speaking a little bit, but not a ton. Tonight, the culmination of tonight, in fact, the idea for tonight came from our referendum engagement group members. They're a very important group, so they'll be sharing most of what we hear tonight. A couple things I want to point out in case you missed it as you came in, and for those online, all of this is on our website as well, linked in. There is an exit slip. You'll see that blue half sheet of paper, and that is after the event tonight. If you have a chance to give us some feedback on a few key questions, there's a front and back to that blue sheet. It's an online form as well, so you can fill it out tonight and leave it with us. You can drop it off anytime, or you can fill it out online. There's a QR code. If you're not sure how to use one of those, I can show you. And we really want your feedback tonight because not everyone's going to have a chance to speak. So make sure to do that. There's also the slideshow that you'll be seeing while we share it online. The key points from that are in a handout. So that was at the front as you came in. So if you didn't get that or the exit slip, please be sure to grab one of those. So that's enough of hearing from me. One quick note, there will be a time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. You may have a question as we're going along. We ask that you hold your question until the end so that we may be answering your question a little bit later. So if you can just hold your questions till the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end, including those online who can ask questions. There's an online form as well. All right, so enough of me. I'm now going to turn it over to our referendum engagement group. And I ask that if there's any members of the referendum engagement group in attendance, if you could please come up to the front, just so that people get to know you. And a representative from the group, Todd Pritchard, will be telling you a little bit more about the referendum engagement group. As they're coming up, if you would just please join me in, clapping, giving them some appreciation, because they're a pretty special group.
Thanks, Aaron, and thank you, committee group. Good evening, everyone. If there's one thing you take away from tonight, it's this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know this is so important for you to be here. We are so grateful for you to be here, and we are grateful for you watching on the live stream as well. We really hope that you're going to get some questions answered tonight, gain insights, share your thoughts on the district's financial situation. So just thank you for taking the time for being here tonight. I'd like to talk to you about the important work that the McFarland School District's Referendum Engagement Group has done. That's these great folks here. Some of the members will be in the audience, so some of us will stay up here, some will be in the audience. We're here to answer questions and get you up to speed on things. The group was created as the first step to collaborate with the community following the defeat of the April 2nd referendum. It consists of 28 people, most of us previous referendum. Many in the group have seen generations of their family members graduate from McFarland. My wife and I, we moved here with our son Sean for really the main purpose was to have him gain a great education. We moved here from Hawaii, and no, I'm not crazy. We moved here because one of the key reasons was Hawaii is ranked 49th in the country when it comes to public education. That was a place that we did not want to be. We wanted to be in a place that really valued public education. Wisconsin is ranked 5th amongst the states, and you probably know this already, McFarland earned the second highest district report card in Dane County. It's really a testament to this community's culture and its commitment to public education. This group has a shared goal to help find what some of our members kind of call the sweet spot. What is the solution here that will help benefit our community, our students, and the district staff, and what is attainable? The group had primary objectives. Understand why the previous referendum didn't pass, analyzing the funding needs of the school district, identifying potential cuts and revenue increases, and exploring the possibility of a revised referendum in November. So why didn't the referendum pass? I think Craig kind of talked about this a little bit earlier on. For a majority of voters, it was just a bridge too far. It was too much money over too much time. And as we know, family budgets are under pressure. Many people were feeling just inflation overload. There was also a lack of community engagement, and that's why some of the folks that we talked to afterwards said they wanted more discussion, more options, more information before the referendum was finalized. And like Craig mentioned, some people didn't even know there was a referendum. So tonight, the district and this engagement group will share some really important information with you about the district's needs and the funding trade-offs. This engagement group is an impressive group of people. I've really been honored to work with them. I've learned so much. They're way smarter than I am. And it really is an outstanding assembly of folks from our community. We helped develop the referendum options that were included in the survey, which we're going to talk about tonight, and really, at our core, try to find common ground. So in closing, I want to just emphasize one thing. It's so important that this is a community involvement process. Tonight is all about you. We want to answer questions. We want to get your input. And this discussion tonight will help shape the future of our schools, our children, and our community. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. And now we're going to turn it over to Al Rundy, a community member here, who's going to talk a little bit about school funding and the budget needs. We want to provide you with some kind of foundational information before we share the survey results. So, Al.
Good evening, and thanks for being here, everybody, and thanks for those of you listening online. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about school funding, but before I do that, let me get my glasses on here. I want to tell you that my wife and I have lived in the district for 30 years. I know a lot of the people probably in the audience. Jill, my wife, worked for the district for 22 years. I'm involved in this because I like analysis. I do some of this kind of work for a living at the state capitol. I describe myself kind of as a reluctant voter on this issue because, like most, I'm not crazy about tax increases. But I balance that with my concern about the needs for the financial viability of the district and also the potential long-term impact on my home value. I said I crunch numbers for a living, so I'll just give you a little numbers. I was looking at this today. In the last decade, this county, Dane County's grown by about 20, last decade they did, about 20 people per day. And in the last 3 years, it's grown by about 26 people per day since 2000. I think that our schools have been strong. Our kids went through there. We love the district. 3 children raised and over the 30-year period we lived here. And I hope we can continue to have good schools. I think it's a big factor in competing for the growth of the population that is in the city, is moving to the county. And I think it's also key in maintaining the home value that when growth slows, we have strong schools to basically support the reason why people want to live here, much like Todd did when he said he moved here from Hawaii. So I'll talk to you a little bit about school financing. I know it's not a fun subject, but one of the questions we get asked is how did the district get to this point where we need more money? The district, along with other districts, is facing this question and its current financial challenge because of how states and the state funds its public schools. Also, the need for competitive pay, which Melanie will talk about later, has been made worse due to the teacher shortage in recent years, as you know. And the state provides significant financial aid to school districts, but it also limits the amount schools can generate from the property tax and from state aid. This is referred to as the revenue limit within the state. It's a per pupil amount. So if you take our pupil population and multiply it by that amount, that revenue limit amount, you get to the total amount of revenue we can raise from the property tax and from state aid. And Aaron, if you could just go to this slide here, possibly.
This is being grumpy.
Oh, okay. So when I'm talking about the revenue limit, you're talking about the yellow portion of this. This is the state aid and the property tax amount. It's the revenue cap or revenue limit. You can see in recent years it hasn't grown a whole lot. The legislature did last year increase the revenue limit by $325 per pupil for the 23-24 year and $325 for the 24-25 year as well. So you see a little bit of growth in that amount. And so going forward, it will slightly increase again, but you can see with the expenditure projections, it's not keeping up with what we need. So McFarland's per pupil revenue limit right now is the lowest among a lot of our neighboring districts, primarily because they've passed revenue limit increases, which allow them to go above that revenue limit. In particular, we're about 20% below the revenue limits of the village of the Monona Grove School District and the Oregon School District are two of our neighboring districts. Also, in lieu of property tax, or in lieu of providing significant increases in funding, the state in recent years directed school districts to use federal funds, ESSER funds they're called, and they're the red block up there, and you can see the district used a bit of those revenues in 21-22, and then more in 22-23, and then 23-24. And as you go forward, you'll see that those ESSER funds go away. They're no longer around for us to spend. I think our district, according to Jeff and Aaron, is one of the last districts to still have ESSER funds available, but you'll see in the next year, in 24-25, we have a deficit because those funds are now gone and the revenue limit did not creep up enough. I will mention on here, we also have the net revenues associated with virtual school academy, and those revenues are basically the amounts over the cost of running that virtual school. So it is a net benefit to the district. So that does help us out a little bit, but you can see we have a $2.4 million deficit. I think in this budget, my understanding is that if we were to have a referendum pass, we may be able to supplant some of those monies later, but right now I think the plan is to take that out of the fund balances of the district, and that again would be one-time money that couldn't be taken out every year because we just simply could afford that in the fund balance. As I said, this one-time funding was used in lieu of property tax increases. The state's model is designed that the only way you can raise the revenue limit is to ask the voters to approve a referendum, and you have to have the exact wording of that referendum and the amounts in that referendum, which was what the district did last spring, the one that failed. So the state's district indicates that 86% of Wisconsin school districts in recent years have asked their districts, taxpayers for increases in their operational levy going forward. I will mention to you that if you look at the scenarios that we have that were given to you for the survey that was filled out by, I think, like 1,400 people in the district, about 23% of the folks, I think, did that, and somebody will go through that numbers later. But those all were the worst possible scenario for the impact on the taxpayer. As I looked at, as I mentioned, the yellow portion of this table up there is basically going to indicate what the property tax levy and state aid is. So if the legislature and the governor and state government would pass increases in state aid, it potentially could make up a larger share of that yellow portion, which would end up reducing property tax burden going forward compared to what the scenario showed in the survey. And also in the past, the district has indicated that if they need less from the taxpayers than what they actually put in the funding request, that they would only levy up to what they need. So that again could also have a positive impact on taxpayers compared to what the scenario showed in the last budget, or the last survey, excuse me. And also, if there is another referendum, I think they're going to continue to show the worst possible scenario going forward. Lastly, I wanted to just mention to you that you may wonder how the district spends its money. The current wages and benefits costs account for about 77% of the $31 million in the district's budget. When combined with direct services for students, such as substitute teachers, 4K teachers, technology support, and transportation services, about 83% of the district's expenses are related to compensation for services for students. Most of the rest of the budget are fixed costs that cannot be changed. I'll also mention to you that this yellow portion up here on the revenue limit and the state's, this does not account for any of the facility debt service costs for the recent facilities that we improved in 2016. So basically, we're just looking at operations here. This is not the facilities, and the debt service associated with those facilities is outside of this. But ultimately, I just want to mention that the budget is about paying for staff. And I think Caitlin here is going to tell us a little bit more about how we pay for those staff and what our budget is like.
Thank you, Al. And here is Caitlin to talk about competitive pay and the teacher shortage.
Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. Much appreciated. I'd like to introduce myself before I get to talk about also a data-heavy subject, competitive pay and teacher shortage. My name is Caitlin Howen. I am a homeowner in McFarland for the past 8 years, so I pay taxes. I'm a parent of 2 girls at the elementary school. If you were in the camp kindergarten line, I spilled coffee all over myself while I was hitting the brake. And I also, for a living, I crunch numbers, and I'm a compensation consultant. So I look at pay of all different kinds of jobs across the country for all different types of industries. So when we talk about competitive pay, I raise my hand to kind of try and explain it in plain language. So I hope to do that tonight. If you have questions afterwards and you want to dig a bit deeper, you're welcome to email me or catch me before we leave, or when you see me at the grocery store, say hi, and I'm happy to provide any information that I have just from working in the industry. Something that the referendum group actually doesn't know about me before we started to convene is that I didn't even know a referendum was on the ballot until I got into the municipal center in April. I had no idea. And I would consider myself to be somewhat informed about the district. And after I realized that the referendum had failed, I decided that I probably needed to get involved because I know that schools are important, and I know that my husband and I moved here specifically and tried really hard to get a house so that we could be in the McFarland School District. And it was terrible to buy a house here. I just want to let everybody know that. It was the pits. So I decided to get involved because I knew it was important. So competitive pay and teacher shortage, and I'm going to stick to my script and plain language, and I'm going to try and speak slowly. So in addition to the state funding issue that Al just referenced, it's getting harder and harder to attract and keep high-quality staff, teachers and support staff and administrators. There's a teacher shortage, specifically though, because fewer people enter the field of teaching from college, and in addition to that, teachers often take different jobs after only a few years in that industry. They can typically find higher paying roles or something with a little bit different scheduling that works for their needs. So we have a teacher shortage. That's not something that's special for McFarland. It is something that we're going to experience nationwide, and the trajectory of that deficit, of that supply, or the resource of teachers is going to continue to increase, just like nurses. Something to keep in mind about our situation, though, is that McFarland is the last school district in Dane County to not have a past referendum to help with operating costs to pay for normal expenses like salaries for staff. This means that all other Dane County districts have acknowledged that they need to increase staff pay and have asked their community to pass a referendum, and they've received that support successfully. Their pay will soon increase if it hasn't already. So because of this, we now need to increase our salaries to make sure our jobs keep up and pay a wage that is competitive with our neighbors. We also know that staff might also be looking for jobs not only in different school districts, but also in what I call general industry, other organizations that don't focus on education. So in summary, all of these details mean that the salary that an employee makes is mainly driven by basic economics of just supply and demand. So we know there's a teacher shortage, which means the supply of that resource has gone down. And when the supply of a resource goes down, that typically means that the demand typically increases. That results in a higher cost to purchase that product, that service, whatever it may be. Think of toilet paper in COVID. Remember that? Toilet paper was expensive and hard to get, and teachers are just like toilet paper in that instance. In a much better way, Erin. So we must pay a higher wage for teachers to get teachers to stay in our district so they don't go somewhere else and find a job. If teachers leave, there's a monetary cost to that, and it's typically not just their salary, but it even costs more money to train and recruit an employee who leaves. But we need to focus not just on the monetary, but also think about the influence that that has to morale and the relationships that that staff member has built with over time with their colleagues, the community, and our kids. Kids thrive on structure, and it makes them feel safe and more able to learn when staff are consistent and they see a friendly face there to support them when they get there in the morning. Some more data, and I'm not going to go too deep into it, but there a chart that's been circulating since the referendum and that was on the survey is that the McFarland School District entry pay rate for teachers right now is just slightly below average when compared to those other districts that we compete with. But remember, all of those other districts just passed a referendum. So they're going to be able to increase their pay soon. So soon we're going to be even farther behind and we're going to fall lower on that list as time goes by. And that gap is going to continue to grow year over year as they continue to keep pace and be competitive with their pay amongst each other. Once a school district or any employer is behind on pay, it becomes very, very difficult to fill that gap and find the money that's necessary to maintain competitiveness with their employers. So the farther behind you get, the harder it is to catch up, which is kind of similar in lots of instances in life. So we try and keep pace as best as we can. Something that is also important to know about teacher pay, or lots of employees' pay, is that part of people's pay is not just their paycheck they get every week or every month, but it's the benefits that they receive too. And lots of people go into the industry of education for those benefits specifically. So the cost of offering those benefits, primarily health insurance, also continues to increase every year with the provider and the insurance carrier that we are able to select. So we need to make sure that we can have money to pay for those increasing benefit costs too. So as a compensation professional, I do this for a living, it's a significant cost to any organization to lose good staff. It's often much more expensive to replace someone than just keep someone that we have. And our district is really known for really high quality teachers, and we do want to keep them. Not just because they're great at what they do and they influence our children and our community positively, but because it's also a fiscally responsible strategy to sustain our school over time. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If you have questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer them or find the answer if I don't know. But the next section will be about the April referendum specifically, and I see Craig coming up, which means that that's probably who's going to be discussing that topic. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thanks very much, Caitlin. We much appreciate your expertise, for sure. Now that we've spoken a little bit about the challenges and issues that we face in the district, I think we responded to these challenges by asking our voters to approve an operational referendum last April. This referendum failed by about a 60 to 40% margin, which is significant to say the least. The district acknowledges and respects the community's decision on this referendum. And some of the main reasons that we heard for why it failed included too much overall money for too long of a time period at a time when people are struggling due to other increased expenses. And that is readily apparent, and it's an issue that is increasingly difficult not just in McFarland, but every place. You see cities around the area that are having referendums, not just school districts. Lack of community engagement prior to the referendum question being decided. That's our bad. And it was absolutely true. I think we've learned from our mistakes the first time around, and if anything, people are going to get tired of all the information and data that will be available to them between now and November. Feeling that the district needs to make cuts before asking for money. It all makes sense. That's absolutely true. Over the period of time between the 2016 and the 2024 referendums, staffing levels were looked at constantly. We've always prided ourselves in the ability to keep a low number of students per classroom. Becomes increasingly difficult to do. Confusion about school funding, and school funding is very confusing. I've been on the board about 15 years, and every year I feel like I'm learning it all over again. It's very complex, it's confusing, and thank goodness we have a superstar business manager in Jeff Mahoney. Lack of clarity on how the money would be spent. This again is a little bit tricky in that we have made it pretty clear throughout that 80%, thereabouts 80% of our entire budget, which is around $30 million, goes to staff salary and benefits. Everything else goes pretty much to fixed cost and costs for things that really can't be changed. We want you to know that we heard you and we hear you now. We're going to be continually looking for feedback. We want to find a compromise position that will work for everyone. We need to find that sweet spot. And that's becoming apparent. It's a difficult thing to do. In addition to our efforts to engage the community, we also want you to know about some of the things that we've done to decrease our expenses. Educator and community member Angie Bazan is here to tell you more about those efforts that we've made thus far. Angie.
Thank you, Craig.
Good evening. My name is Angie Bazan. I am a teacher at the McFarland School District. I will be entering my 27th year of education this fall and my 11th here in McFarland. And as I stand up here and I look out, I can see the father of my best friend from the 3rd grade, and I can see some of my teachers from when I was a student here in McFarland, and I can see the parents of kids that I babysat when I was a child here, and I see some of my colleagues, and the McFarland School District really is home for me. So I, as a member of the Referendum Engagement Group, have been asked to share with you what we've been working on the last few months and some of the ways in which we have made cuts already since the referendum in April. And I'm to the age now where I need these. After the referendum in April, the district worked together very closely to look at what our expenditures were and what things we could cut, what things we could pause, and what things we could make adjustments to impact our budget shortfall. Through collaboration between the school board, staff, administration, and this referendum engagement group, the district has made over $1.2 million in cuts since April. First, the district reduced our staffing costs by approximately $700,000. The district did this by not filling some of the positions that were open when staff left our district. This included elementary teachers, special education staff, educational assistants, and library staff in our district. In some cases, this meant that teachers who were teaching one grade level have agreed to move to a different grade level and will be teaching something completely different this fall, which is going to require them to learn a new curriculum and learn how to engage with some of our new little learners. In other cases, in many cases, this means that staff members have taken on additional responsibilities. Secondly, the district has reduced other budgets, accounting for the other $500,000 in cuts that have been made so far. I was personally a part of a group that worked through April and May to meet and look at some of the expenditures of the district and try to make the decisions, the tough decisions as to where some of these cuts could come from. We resulted in a 10% across the board cut in budgets across the district. This involved a variety of things, such as raising some student fees, reducing supply budgets across the district, and also reducing technology. Lastly, another $49,000 was saved through reduced administrator pay or administration agreeing to no pay increases for the upcoming school year. Even though, as you know, that we have cut $1.2 million, we still have a budget deficit of $2.5 million going into the current school year that starts in just over a month. The district remains committed to continuing to look at ways that we can decrease this money or these expenditures and continue to increase revenue within our district. While one of our goals in that budget referendum group was to minimize the impact on our students. Every decision we made, we stopped and talked about how will this impact the students in our schools. We know that it is impossible to make cuts of this magnitude, millions of dollars, that won't impact our students and, of course, our staff, but we are doing the best that we can. Before we move on to our next speaker, I want to share some thoughts on behalf of the teachers. We want you to know how much we appreciate your support for us. We take our jobs very seriously, and we sometimes can be our own hardest critics, but we keep coming back because we are committed to the students and we are committed to this community. Every time my students come up with a project that they want to do, this community has stepped up and supported me and my kids. This year, the student council wanted to win a cereal box challenge, and you helped us raise 1,000 boxes of cereal for our food pantry. Last year, my sociology class was learning about poverty, and they wanted to do something they could see, and you helped us wipe out every negative lunch balance in our school district. A few years ago, my geography class was learning about water scarcity, and you helped them put a water well in a village in Africa that they will remember forever. So you guys have always been there, and we could not do what we do without the encouragement and support of this district. There is not a staff member in this district who is not spending time this summer going to conferences, reading books, planning, engaging fun things for their classrooms this fall, and who are committed to our school and our students. I grew up in this community. I graduated from this school. My daughter graduated from this school just a few years ago. And I know that the schools are the heart of this community. And what brings us all together is the school district, whether it's an athletic event, it's a play, it's a musical concert. This community always rallies around our school. I also want to share that not only am I as a teacher, I'm a parent, I'm a community member like you, and I am a homeowner and a taxpayer in this district as well. We too will feel this. And yet we know that without it, cuts will have to be made that will impact our students' learning. We don't just teach your students, we build relationships with them that are lifelong. We know which one of our students needs some extra food snuck in their backpack before they go home for the weekend. We know which ones of our students need a safe place to sleep tonight. We know so much more about our students in our community than you may see every day. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and we are very, very lucky to be in this village. And as educators, we are hopeful that we can continue to provide this high quality of instruction that our students deserve, and also continue to provide working conditions that bring staff here and keep them here. So thank you for coming tonight and being engaged in this process. And now I'm going to turn it over to Samantha Zylenga and Bruce Fisher, who will kind of talk about what happens next without a referendum.
Hello, everybody. My name is Samantha Zeilinga, and I am a parent of a fourth grader. I also graduated from McFarland exactly like 20 years ago now, so that's kind of scary. But I moved back here so that my son could attend this district, and I joined this committee because his education is one of the highest priorities in my life. So right now I want to talk to you a little about what would happen if there is no referendum. So if a referendum were to fail. It should also be noted that some of these things will also apply if there is a very low referendum that is passed. Because a low referendum means that we're still going to have to make substantial cuts. And frankly, there's not very many areas to cut in when 77% of your budget is staff. So without a referendum, the district will need to cut positions and reduce staff pay or like stall staff pay. For every $1 million, it's about the equivalent of 14 teaching positions. So for the 24-25 school year, it's a $2.5 million deficit. That's about the equivalent of 35 positions, 35 teaching positions, okay? That is 17% of our professional staff. Put a little bit more context. Like I know my son, I think they had like 8 classes in his grade, okay? And we're in 35 positions. It's also possible that student enrollment will decrease as students choose to attend other districts due to the cuts that impact the quality of the education they receive. If this happens, more additional cuts will need to be made to account for the reduced enrollment and the reduced amount of money that we get from each child. So additional changes that could happen, aside from teacher cuts and actually consequences of teacher cuts, would be increased class sizes, less teachers, same amount of students, your class sizes get larger. We could also see reduced amount of elective options, reduced amount of sections for related arts. There could be less technology and less software. You know, our kids, especially the young ones, like Epic and Dreambox, all of those will come at an expense to the district. And then we could also see higher fees, field trips, bus fees, athletic fees. Somehow to keep these activities going, we're going to have to find a way to pay for them. So I know that was really depressing, but now I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Fisher, who he hates being called Mr. Fisher, but he was my teacher, so it's like, that's what I call him.
You can tell that I feel, well, if you can't tell, I will tell you I am very blessed to have lived the life that I had. I mean, Angie was a student of mine, Sam was a student of mine. I just have really been blessed, and I don't know, I'm just one of these people, I don't tend to remember bad things. All my my memories of teaching were fun, and again, just really blessed. I started teaching here in 1976, and my wife and I moved here in 1986, I believe, and you know, I've taught for 40 years, 37 of them here, technically 36, I believe. One year I was under contract, but I taught in Scotland, and this district was nice enough to let me get a Fulbright, and it was an amazing experience. By the way, they don't have extracurriculars there, and they have about a 20 to 30% dropout rate in UK, because they don't have these extra things that we kind of, you know, our sporting events, the clubs, and those are the kind of things. And in fact, for myself, if it wasn't for running, I know I wouldn't have gone to college. And in some ways, I'm just so grateful for those opportunities I had. So our public school system in the United States, I think, is top notch. But anyway, I was a little nervous when I started thinking about this. You guys ever had that dream where you wake up, or you think you're sleeping or something like that, and you realize you had a class and you hadn't gone to it, you hadn't attended it, and all of a sudden you're going to have this final exam? Well, that's kind of how I felt with this, because when we left on Tuesday, they asked me to speak, and I'm going like, well, what am I going to say? And it then dawned on me that everyone who has spoken today, and they're all experts, have been talking about a lot of factual, kind of what I would call left brain, very rational type stuff. And I'm going to try to go a different route. I'm going to go more right brain, more affect, and in some ways, it's going to come from my heart. I'm supposed to talk about what happens if it fails. The only one that I can really talk to you about is one that I'm just very familiar with, and that's Fort Atkinson. One of my former students is a teacher there, of all things, a social studies teacher. And this teacher came in to our first listening session, and this teacher was telling us about the reaction in that community, what happened. And it was really, for me, it just hit me in the gut, because he was talking about how, first of all, since that has happened, they failed another one. They've lost 45 staff members at Fort Atkinson. They're just going elsewhere. And it turns out even the kids in the school are walking around and saying stuff like, they don't care about us. They just don't care about us. And I want you guys, again, over and over again, life is about a balance. We have to find that balance. We've got to balance the needs of our children's children with your needs to live. And we've got to find that balance, because they're both important, but your need to live and have a good life can't outweigh our children's children. We've got to be cognizant of that. And so that's what we're here for. We've got to find a way, and I think we can do it. And I keep saying it over and over again, it's becoming trite, but it's right to the heart of it. We're all in this together. Even with the village, we're going to have to find ways that we're going to have to work together. And that's going to be our challenge. But I think we can do it. I think we're McFarland, and I think that's good. Anyway, it turns out the other thing that I think is probably the biggest cost for a community like Fort Atkinson is the division, the divisiveness that's taken place. That community is now just at each other's throat. In fact, it's called a Pyrrhic victory, where you win a battle. We defeated it. We got that referendum done. Hooray. Yeah, well, that's kind of like you won the battle, and now you're going to lose the war. That's what the Pyrrhic victory is about. And I feel like that community is going to really suffer. We have to work together. We've got to get this thing going. Craig Sherman, you said it best. We've got to find that sweet spot. And I think that's the key. Everyone here realizes the importance of education, and we just got to figure out what that balance is. Is it going to be one of the choices that we put on our survey? Is it going to be something that we will kind of work together? And hopefully you guys will give us a lot of input there, and we can be creative in doing that. I also I want to say that I was hit in the gut earlier, before the April referendum, by an elderly woman who I was sitting next to, realizing that she's probably no older than I am. But anyway, she said, I realize this is important. It's about the kids, but I don't know if I can pay for it. I really don't know if I can afford this. And I think that hit me in the guts. So I'm trying to find that balance, and that's where you guys are going to have to really come in. One of the things that I do as a school board member is I visit all the schools 4 times each year. And it's when I'm walking through those schools, and I leave, I'm like, what the hell did I just do? I don't know what I accomplished. But I know that teachers appreciate it. I appreciate it when I was a teacher, just having a board member stop in. But you cannot believe the incredible work that's going on in those classrooms. It's really remarkable. And I wish I could get more people to kind of join me, because you just see how incredibly creative and caring these staff members are. I think maybe the thing that I want to talk about most is we have to develop trust. We have to have faith. We have to trust this guy, okay? In my 40 years experience, I've never had a superintendent who comes close to what he does. It's amazing. And I want you guys to realize that. To me, it's remarkable that you can get the union president in this school to sit down and talk about cuts. Now, you tell me, how often does that happen in that rancor? He has developed that. I was asked to get on the school board because we were at a point where we were actually hemorrhaging. I'd never seen it. I'd never seen so much turnover. The number of staff just leaving. I lost one of my really good close friends, an excellent teacher. He went to Epic. And we were in this kind of horrible situation, so we need to get a superintendent, and we lucked out, and we got him. And we still have work we got to do. We got to make cuts. But there's that trust, that faith. And I want you people in the community, you have to have that as well. You got to trust us, and we have to have trust in this man. He's worked on things like a staff handbook that most superintendents wouldn't even touch for probably, the first 15, 20 years in the district. We passed a strategic plan. We have done so much in 3 years, and it's just incredible to me. So we are blessed. We have an outstanding superintendent. At the same time, he was willing to not cut his salary, but I think freeze it. He is now 14th out of 14 schools in Dane County. He has the lowest pay. And of course, that's on top of being number 2 in all of Dane County on the state report card. The only district that scored higher than us was Wanakee. And we know we can't compete with Wanakee, but yet we can. We know we can. We can whoop them if we have to. The truth of the matter is, we just have to put our mind together. We got to work at it. But the Veronas, we beat them. We're surpassing them. But in some ways, you get there and go like, okay, you've done this, and the reward is you're going to freeze your salary. But that's what this man is doing. Another one that we're just blessed to have is Jeff Mahoney. Now, I know a lot of people who sit there and go like, oh, he's just doing the numbers and the crunches. He won the state award for the most outstanding business manager in the state of Wisconsin. I'll tell you a weird story. When we were interviewing for superintendents, 2 of the candidates who were running for superintendent, 2 of them, they were asked the question, why would you like to come to McFarland? They said, because of Jeff Mahoney. The man knows so much. He can help us in so many ways. So we've got to get over this rancor. We've got to come together, work together. We've got to have trust. We've got to have faith with each other. I've been also blessed having lived in this community. And in talking to one of my neighbors today, Jerry, thanks for giving me this. He said, this is Jerry Christensen, a neighbor right across the street. He said, education is one of those intangibles. And I just said, what a brilliant statement. It's such a simple statement. How do you put a price on it? How do you put a price on something like this? I mean, you go to Florida, there's a price. You have your lawn, cut every 2 weeks or every week. You have a price for that. You know that when you buy a shirt. But how do you put a value on education and what this school has done and what the teachers have done? I don't know if you can, but you all know that. You know that there's a real value there, and we've got to keep that alive for our children's children. So anyway, one of the things that we need to do is we also need to thank a guy named Lloyd Schneider, who in 1961 had the courage to try an experiment. He wanted to start a school district here in McFarland. We didn't have our own. We wouldn't have. And what's really amazing, if you see the video that Gary Schneider's put together on that, where he's interviewed, the people in the community said, we're willing to have higher taxes so we can have our own school, so we can have some identity to this community. The Olympics are starting on Saturday, right? I think Saturday, or is it Friday? Friday, thank you. It turns out that McFarland, little old McFarland's, had 6 Olympians. Are you guys aware of that? 6. Little McFarland. There's something special about this community. Now, one of them was kind of a cheat because he made 2 Olympics. That's Steve Lacey. But the truth of the matter is, that's something, this school district, it's magical. And I can remember when I first came here, I was just kind of blown away. And that's why my wife and I decided to live here. The other one I heard was from another former teacher, Gary Schneider. He said, above average schools for below average cost. That has always been McFarland. Now, I don't want to have that as an excuse. Okay, therefore, we can just make sure that our teachers are paid right at the very bottom, because it is a fact. We've lost teachers, and we're going to continue to lose teachers if we don't keep up. We have to keep up. That doesn't mean we have to be top. We don't have to. McFarland is special in that own way. Angie Bazan, you hear about the most amazing teacher I've ever seen. And she just came here because she loves McFarland. It turns out we can do it if we're willing to work together, if you guys are willing to share your ideas. Here's an interesting statistic. The state guarantees $11,000 per student. That's like a minimum wage. They will provide that to every school district in the state. You know what we are? We're $12,000. That's how much we spend. Do you know what Shorewood does? Do you know how much it spends? It's near $24,000. Now we know that they're rich. We know that they're willing to pay a lot of money. Their starting salary is getting close to $70,000. They think it's important to have people who teach live in that community. Now, I do too. I can't even get my son. He can't afford to live here. But the truth of the matter is, we've got to be cognizant of that. That's what we're competing with, okay? But at the same time, I'm going to just proudly say, in 2002, our state cross-country team, the boys team, came in first. Guess who got second? Shorewood. We can do it, you guys. We have to work together. We are all in this together. And if you guys are willing to just work with your neighbors, you've got to spread the word. We've got to do what Craig says. We've got to find that sweet spot. It's there. We just have to have that drive and that determination to do that. Thank you.
Very impactful. I don't know how to set you up, Cassandra. It's not quite as exciting, but Cassandra is going to be talking a little bit about the survey to refamiliarize yourself with that, and then we're going to share the results.
Good evening. I'm Cassandra Dennis. I'm a mom of 2 kids in the district and a homeowner in the community. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight to learn about where we are. It's hard going after Bruce with a lot of heavy numbers, so I will ask that you bear with me. So I'm going to give us a little start of how many people filled out the survey. Is anyone seeing this information for the first time? Okay, so we're going to go through this together. So based on the input that we got after the referendum committee was formed, we came up with a plan that talked about several options for going to a next referendum and to help us get a feel for what the community was open to. All 3 of the options that were put on the survey included the $1.2 million cuts that we already discussed this evening. And each of those options included added money every year. And why, do you ask? That goes back to what Caitlin talked about earlier. That's about maintaining an employee. Those costs go up every year. We also wanted to include the options that were reoccurring. So we're going to go through all of these options that are all reoccurring. And I want to be very clear, as we talked about in the beginning, that none of this has officially been decided on. We are talking about the options, and then soon you'll hear what the community results show, and we would like more feedback so that we can go through and talk and come together and make those decisions about what is best for our school. Thank you, Erin. Okay, so referendum option number 1. This was the lowest amount on the survey for a total of $6.4 million. The amount increases $1.6 million each year after 4 years. For a $400,000 property, the total increase would be between $373 and $399 per year that these add up each year. So by the end of the 4th year of this referendum, you would be paying $1,554 more annually than you would currently be paying now. This option requires an additional $1.6 million in cuts, and it would keep our staff below the area average. Thank you, Erin. So option 2 totals for $7 million. The amount increases $1.7 million for the 4 years. So that is looking at a $400,000 property value of an increase between $404 and $430 per year, and those also add up each year. So comparing that option 2 to option 1, so option 1 you're looking at $15.54 for an increase. Option 2 you're looking at $16.77 increase, more than they currently are. Now this option, yes, is more, $30 more roughly, but it keeps our staff still below the area average. So that brings us to option 3. Option 3 is a total of $7.6 million. The amount increases by $1.9 million each year for 4 years. So for a $400,000 property, we're looking at increases between $432 and $456 per year that also add up. So compared to option 1, this amount is going to be $60 more annually. So by the 4-year period, you're looking at $1,785 more than you're currently paid. So this option does increase our starting teacher salaries at or near the area average. So I know that's a lot of money, but the key is option 1 is going to have many more cuts that we heard about from the people who were before me. Option 2 is still going to have cuts. And option 3 is just going to make us equal to where we are compared to our peers in the area. So the differences on each of these options contain significant changes and cuts to our school. So Erin, I am ready for you to review those survey results.
Thank you, Cassandra. A lot of build up to these results, and I'll tell you, there's good reasons. We are very excited to review the results. I want to just make a first comment before we show a video. We contracted with a company called School Perceptions for this survey, and they're going to be sharing the results. And you may wonder, well, why did you have an outside group come in and do the survey? We wanted to get the most objective survey that we could. By using a third party like that. They're experts, and they also will provide us feedback whether we want to hear it or not. They're going to be honest and tell us how you're feeling, and that's what we need to hear. We need to hear the truth. And so by using this company, they also have this expertise because their prediction rate, so if they say a referendum is going to pass or fail, and a district goes forward and brings forward that question, they have a 94% prediction rate. That's really high. So they're very informative. Many of the districts in the state of Wisconsin use School Perceptions because of their history of being predictive about what a community will support. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to this presentation so you can hear the results.
Hello, McFarland School District. My name is Scott Gerard, and I am a project manager with School Perceptions. I had the opportunity to work on your community survey this spring and summer, and here I am to present the results. I'm going to go through a few different kinds of information tonight. So first of all, we've got background info, and anything with that blue logo is going to look mostly familiar to you. That's going to cover a lot of what was in your survey as a reminder. We'll go through survey and respondent information about who took your survey. We'll get to the results and analysis. And at the end, there will be a time for a wrap up and questions. Little reminder about us at School Perceptions and our experience. Founded in 2002, and we have helped more than 1,000 districts navigate the strategic planning and referendum planning process. So, your survey. There was a July 3rd deadline. We are at 1,451 respondents, which gets us to a 24.2% response rate. That's a really good response rate. The average we see is in the high teens, mid to high teens. And so hearing from this large of a segment of your community tells you that they were ready to share with you their thoughts on the plans presented to them. And you're getting some really good data. We feel good once we surpass about 10% as far as how predictive our data is. And so being at 24.2 is just a really strong number. That margin of error on the bottom there is just a product of the number of respondents. So out of anyone's control, really just depends on how many people respond, but it's an important number to keep in mind as we go through the results. So who took your survey? Among respondents, 30% were in the 35 to 44 range. Not surprising to see that, and the 45 to 54 range being the top two. A lot of parents in that age range who are responding. We did have 24% in the 65 plus group, which we really like to see. Good representation there. Those folks will show up in November and will reliably vote, and so it's important to hear from them on the survey to understand how they're feeling about your plans. 93% of your respondents do have their primary residence in the district, which means that they will be able to vote on a potential ballot initiative. 6% here that said no, and the 1% that are not sure. Those could be folks, open enrollment families, staff who live outside the district's borders. Their thoughts are really important, and we still want to hear from them in the survey. But when we're predicting an election outcome for November, we need to look at that 93% who live within the district boundaries and will be able to vote. We had representation from all of the municipalities, 77%, vast majority from the village of McFarland. 11% of your respondents were staff members, 49% were parents, and then the remainder is going to be the biggest group in your community, and that is the non-parents, non-staff. We asked, how do you like to receive school and district information? As you can see, your non-parents, non-staff really like your newsletters. That's a really high number for newsletters among that group, so that's good to see. Your parents like your emails. So those are two good ways to communicate with your community. And now on to the referendum question. So a little reminder of the options that were presented to folks. So first we have option 1 here, option 2, and option 3. So this slide, we break down by those 3 subgroups that I had mentioned earlier. We have staff, we have parents, and we have non-parents, non-staff. What we do here is this first group, the 34% of non-parents, non-staff, would support option 3. So basically, 53% of parents would support option 3, and 57% of staff would support option 3. The next one over is option 2, so slightly smaller. So as we move to the right on this line, it's pretty safe that most of the folks who would support a bigger referendum will support a step down and the steps down after that. And so we add these numbers as we move to the right. So what that means is your 34% of non-parents, non-staff who would support option 3, plus your 5% of non-parents, non-staff who would support option 2, mean that we have 39% support among non-parents, non-staff for option 2. Another 5, now we're up to 44%. What we then look at is when that support for each group surpasses 50%. So what you can see here is among both your parents and your staff, you surpass that 50% within option 3. However, among your non-parents, non-staff, which again are the largest segment of your community, you don't surpass that 50% until we get to smaller referendum. And so that is going to come into play on this slide. So we use some data from the Census Bureau to estimate what your voting population is going to look like. About 30% of your voters are going to be parents. About 70% of your voters are going to be non-parents, non-staff. So what that means is we have to weight those percentages that we looked at in the previous slide. So what we do is we take that 30% of parents, multiply it by the parent support for each option. Then we take the 70% of non-parents, non-staff, multiply it by the non-parent, non-staff support for each option. When we add those two numbers together, we get a predicted vote outcome. So what these numbers mean is if the election were held today, option 3, if a referendum were on the ballot for option 3, 39.7% would vote yes for that. If a referendum were on the ballot for option 2, we would predict 44.7% would vote yes for that initiative. Both of those are obviously below 50% and outside the margin of error. Now at option 1, we're at 49.7%, which is basically 50%. So right here, we've got a 50-50 shot for option 1 if it were on the ballot today. As you go smaller, that number jumps up pretty significantly. But again, right here is where you reach that point where you've got a chance to potentially see approval given the margin of error. Now that margin of error is plus or minus, so it could be above 50%. You also could be slightly lower. So that's important to keep in mind, but you're right at that 50-50, you have a shot. Stepping away briefly from the referendum, the overall satisfaction data. So we ask respondents on a 1 to 4 scale to rate the district in 4 different areas. Because it's a 1 to 4 scale, the median is a 2.5. As you can see among your staff and your parents, every single area is above that median. Non-parents, non-staff, you're above a 3.0 at delivering a high quality education, just below a 3.0 at building pride in the community, and a couple lower numbers here. For what it's worth, managing funds appropriately is almost always the lowest number on these surveys, especially with an operational referendum. Folks who take a survey about the district asking for more money are going to have questions about how funds are being managed. So another way of looking at that data, this is just among all respondents. And so you can see your percent great or good here, how many folks responded with that 3 or 4, and the average that comes out to. As you can see, again, for everything except that managing funds, you're above the median, and you're just below it there with about half of folks saying you're doing good or great at managing funds appropriately. One other overall satisfaction measure, we ask on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? The average for the district was a 7.18. What we find most important to focus on in this slide are these top 3 numbers. So those are going to be your sort of district ambassadors. They're folks who are out there talking you up, even if no one brings you up, and saying positive things. And so we surpass 50% up to 54% above those top, within those top 3. And so seeing that kind of support is just, it's a very positive result at this point for you all. And that is the end of our results. If anyone has any questions, the district knows how to reach me, but thank you all for the opportunity to work on your survey.
Thank you virtually, Scott, for sharing that with us. I think, you know, though it's important to have kind of those basic facts, if you're looking to get back to those, we can share those with you. They are on our website. So let me just get my technology straight. Uh-oh, I think I lost it, Ethan. Do you have advice for me? Thank you. I was trying to do that fancy thing you just taught me. I'll just keep talking. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the comments on the survey as well. We received over 900 comments, and I have read each and every one of those and analyzed them. School perception also, and thank you very much, you're very kind. School perception also analyzed those. And there's several themes that emerged. 46% of all respondents left at least one comment, so that is amazing. One of the things when asked if they would not, to the question, if you said you would not support a referendum, why? Tell us why, so we understand. Great question, informative answers. The biggest theme was one that you would expect, and I think is important that we hear, is just about property taxes. Property taxes have gone up and up and up. The school portion of your property taxes may have gone down, likely has gone down, but overall your property taxes keep going up. And it's hard, and it's hard. And so I think that's an important message for us to hear. Others are, we really want you to look at other areas to cut. We want you to consider a non-recurring referendum, so not one that continues, after the amount of years, in this case 4 years. Concerns about financial mismanagement and just a lack of trust, I think. Concerns about communication, which we are acknowledging, and then also a real focus on state funding. You have paid enough money to fund schools already. The state has a surplus. And, people saying we'd like some of that money to fund our schools instead of adding to our tax burden. So very important things. And then you heard a lot about the satisfaction. I just want to highlight something that is really, really important, is on that survey, you said over and over, we have great teachers and we love the teachers here. Thank you for providing a good education to our kids. Over and over. And I just want to emphasize that because regardless of how people voted in April, or maybe, in the future may vote, or feedback you may be sharing with us, we know that you appreciate the school district, and the school district appreciates you. We can't do what we do without your support. So that is a mutual commitment. So those are some of the themes. I want to talk about next steps, and then we'll get into questions and answers. First of all, you can learn a lot more at our website, and we actually have it queued up, so you have to go to this page in order. If you click on our website, it's going to say, hey, look at this. And I've tried to make it as user-friendly as I can. It's continually getting updated. You can see, for those watching at home, the meeting slideshow, key points, the results video we just watched is there. The exit slip that we're hoping you're going to fill out at the end of this. We already will have the recording for this evening. It's the same as the live stream link right here. We talk a little bit about some of the basics of the financial challenges, share more about the options, share a few resources. People have said, how do you spend your money? We want to know more about your budget. Here's more information than you may want to know. And then this is my favorite part, because I am adding to this every day, questions and answers. So there are this many questions, and we just keep adding them as they come in. All you need to do is click on one of them, and it has the information provided below. So please keep asking questions. There's a spot to ask more questions right here, and we really want to use this. I know technology is not everybody's favorite thing, but it'll provide more information. So please do that. We also want to gather more feedback. Of course, these meetings, the exit slips. Contact our board. Our board wants to hear from you. Email them. They've started office hours, and I know some of you have taken advantage of those. I believe the next one is tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the library. Is that correct? Sounds right? Yep, I heard a yep. We're going to go with that. So we're continuing to do that to engage the community. The other thing is come to our board meetings. You can also send a written public comment to us. It's got to be 50 or 500 words or less, or come in person. At the start of that meeting, August 5th is our next one. The referendum engagement group is going to be presenting their recommendations based on the feedback from you in the survey. So please come, share your thoughts with us. We want to hear from you. We don't want to wait until, in this last case, April 3rd to hear from you. It's very important. If there is a referendum in November, the board would need to make that decision by August 27th. And once that decision is made, it can't be changed, right? Because there's a process to get it on the ballot. It takes some time, especially with early voting. So that's some of those next steps. We're now going to move into question and answer. And we have some ground rules here. I'm going to explain kind of the process a little bit. First of all, if you can try to limit your question or comment to around 30 seconds, that does have a buffer built in. So we know that you might go over that. We just want to respect the equity of voice in the room and some asking questions online. And we'd like to give everybody in the space a chance to ask a question before we repeat people asking another question, just to do that to make sure we get more people engaged. In addition to, raising your hand, and Stu's going to run around and have a mic for asking that, we do have paper copies for you if you want to write down. Stu's got some of those. If you would rather write your question and have Stu read it or I can read it, that's fine too. Some people don't want to be on the mic. So you can raise your hand and you can say, hey, can you give me a piece of paper, and I'll answer that. We're going to try to rotate between online questions and in-person questions because we really want to honor our people that are attending virtually. And if you see me on my phone, it's not because I'm, Snapchatting with someone. It's because I'm being fed questions that are coming in online. And I'll probably start with one of those questions just to get us warmed up a little bit. Obviously, be kind, in sharing your questions and comments. Be open to the ideas of others. You're here, you're engaged. I trust that you're going to do that. But I think it makes everybody feel a little better for me to say that. Try to limit side conversations. Sometimes when we're answering questions, somebody, starts having a conversation with the person next to them, and it can be distracting. We're going to try to, as much as possible, have our referendum engagement group members answer questions. So some of them are up front here, and they'll do that. Some of them are in the crowd, and they'll pop up, and they'll say, I can answer that. And you may say, well, why can't you answer that question? I can probably answer that question. But sometimes I talk in edges speak. And it kind of goes over people's heads sometimes, because when you live and breathe this every day, it's harder to keep it simple. And so what they've done a great job at, and hopefully you felt that way tonight, is trying to translate some of these things into simple things. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to start with the first question. And this is a question that came on from someone out there. I know I point up to there because that's where the cameras are. And I want to address this question. The question is, DPI, that's our Department of Public Instruction, shows McFarland has a disproportionate amount of administrators than the other districts you continue to compare us to. A staggering ratio of 1 to 125 students. So one administrator for every 125 students. While the next highest is Monona at 1 to 182. And the average among those is 1 to 194. Why don't we cut administrators to save money and bring us into alignment with other districts? Great question, and I'm so glad I get to answer that question. Because what that is, when you go onto DPI, it's confusing because all of our virtual academy data is connected to our data. So we are the host for WEVA, and they've been a great partner for us. So they have, I think, 4,400 kids from across the state that open enroll into this virtual school. It's a non-instrumentality charter. So what that means is they run their school, and we are sort of the connection, the public school entity that connects with them. This year it brought us about $1.4 million, which provides great tax relief for all of you. When you pull data from DPI, it includes all of those administrators and staff. And they have a totally different instructional design because they are a virtual school. So let me answer that question with accurate information, and no fault to the person. They pulled the data and felt like it was accurate. This happens all the time. It happens for achievement data. It happens for just salaries, adding new staff. It can be very confusing. So really, if you think about our administrators, what we consider our administrative team, those are the people on the administrative contracts. And there are 13 of us. There are 9 building level people, so that's building principals and associate principals. So 2, 2, 2, and 3. The high school has an additional because of the additional students. So that's about a 1 to 250 ratio. If you include the 4 what we call cabinet members, so that's myself, the Director of Teaching and Learning, Director of Student Services, and Director of Business, that comes out to be 13. So about 2,400 divided by 13 is 184.6. So if you include those staff, that 184 puts us right about where that average was. So that's just a simple correction that I was glad to be able to provide. Caitlin, grab a mic.
Hello.
Hi.
Wonderful. Something I'd like to add to that, just through discussions on this group, that I didn't know is that lots of those administrators that are not in that principal or assistant principal seat are wearing many hats for different types of roles that lots of other organizations typically have. So we don't have a communications director. There is also not an IT director. And there's also not a human resources director. And with my expertise in HR, I don't know of any organization that has more than 400 staff that doesn't have any sort of HR support. So when we're talking about onboarding staff, working with the regulations and laws required to operate and work in the United States, filling out an I-9, thinking about termination, running payroll, those functions within an organization need to happen even for the school district. And we don't have staff that fulfill that role on a full-time basis. So although Aaron tries to minimize his activities within our district, he's wearing all of these hats, as well as Jeff Mahoney, simultaneously with what we see in the education space. So I commend our administrative staff for the workload that they have. I work in and help with leadership and organizational structure in other organizations, and this is pretty impressive. So I'd like to mention that. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. And we'll now take a question from the crowd. So if you have one, kind of stand up so Stu can run to you. As he's doing that, I'm just going to reference that this is actually one of the questions that is answered on our website. We have too many administrators that pay too much. Why don't you cut them or pay them less? I will say we're always looking at cuts for administrative teams and whether they're necessary. Yes?
Thank you. My name is Ken Boyd. You've done a really great job of explaining our needs. It's quite clear. And you've explained that people have concerns about the cost. I have very much concerns about paying another $1,500 in 4 years when I've already been made aware that our village taxes will also be going up every year for the next 4 years. So that is a concern, but the one thing in all of the people that I'm in contact with having concern other than the cost is the perception of misappropriation of funds. And why did this come up so suddenly? Why is this need all of a sudden? And so why couldn't it have been seen in something worked up gradually?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'll turn to one of our group members. It looks like Mr. Rundy.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think if you look back at the slide that I showed you, this one with the school funding and budgets, you'll see that the state kind of said for 2 years, they're not really giving us an increase in what our revenue limit would be per pupil, and they wanted the districts to kind of use the federal money to get by in that year, in those 2 years, 3 years, roughly. So they didn't really get an increase. So we used that to basically pay for, I think, 31 additional existing staff members in the last year. These were existing staff members that were already hired, and now that federal money's going away. And like I said, we were one of the last districts to still have some of this federal money remaining. And that federal money, along with the growth in our budgets associated with compensation and other costs, are leading to the $2.4 million gap that I showed you earlier today and this evening. And that will continue to grow each year as compensation costs go up every year. you don't just pay a salary increase one year. I think what we'd like to do is pay, if you pay 2%, 2%, 2%, the second year you got to pay 4%, the third year you got to pay 6%. So those costs continue to go up every year. So your gap will continue to increase.
Does it, were you going to add? Let's get over so we can get it on the mic. Thank you, Ken. And then if other members have anything to add.
So my question is, were there any red flags given? I'm guilty of not following and being more involved. So were there red flags and warnings given a year ago, 2 years ago, that this was coming and this was going to be a problem? And also the misappropriation of funds is the other issue that I'm commonly hearing.
Do you, and I just asked a follow-up.
At least the perception of the
yeah.
perception.
Is there anything specifically related to that? It's a pretty large thing to say.
Yeah, pretty broad statement, but that's what
Okay.
people are stating to me. So I'm just passing it on.
Of course, I just wanted to understand, and I think Samantha's going to talk. She seems.
I just want to mention to you that this is not dissimilar to what other districts are going through. The federal money going away, the lack of increase in the revenue limit for school districts in those years. So a lot of districts went through it. We're the last one, I think, to have to go to referendum in Dane County on this issue. So it's not that there was anything really misappropriated. I think we lived within our means, what we were allowed to live within, and we used the federal money to help us out to get through that. But now that federal money goes away, and we have a concern going forward.
Hi, Ken. As far as if there are any red flags or this being talked about, this has been being talked about on the school board level for a few years now. And I think, you and I have talked when talking about village things, and you said, people don't watch the meetings. And so I think it's on the job of the school to try to get information out more. And I feel that the board administration has recognized that we should have gone through processes like this before approving in question last time. And I think all throughout the year, we need to try to get information out to the community, especially those that don't have children, because you don't get all the emails that the school gets. But the school board meetings are all on YouTube, and the agendas are all online. And Jeff Mahoney, multiple times, is like, we're going to have to go to referendum. We're going to have to, after these ESSER funds are gone, we're going to have to go to referendum. So this was mentioned, and I'm hoping we can prevent this in the future, because I'm seeing this like new thing the past couple months in the community with everybody getting involved with this and with things going on with the village, that I hope that both the school and the village and the community find better forms of communication to address these issues earlier. And then as far as misappropriation of funds, I know it's a big thing people like to talk about, like this room. It is gorgeous, right? And the AstroTurf and the pool and all of that. And those, frankly, were decisions that were made in 2016 in a completely different climate than we're at. And we didn't know state funding was going to go this sharply in this way. We didn't know COVID was going to happen. I know I personally made some choices in 2016 that I would not make in 2024. And we've been very responsible with using these facilities, and we're going to be using them to our advantage as a way to try to increase revenue. And basically at the end of the day, like, what's done is done. And that was, the capital referendum, and is going to be done being paid for very shortly here. So.
Thank you. And I know Melanie's going to make a comment. I'm just going to point out this slide too. It's just another way to illustrate what Al's been sharing, which is you can see that brighter red part is that federal funds. And 2022 and 23, that was 8% of our budget, 11% this past year. And that's that part, that chunk that's going away. There was an increase in the state, the $325 per student, and that certainly helped. But it just didn't close that gap. And I'll just be honest and say, we were hoping that this fiscal cliff, that's the term that we've been using across the state as school districts, we were hoping that the state would recognize these federal funds are going away, so now's the time We've saved taxpayers a lot, and you've got a surplus. So can we, now that this federal money's going away, and we were optimistic and wrong in that regard, and that led to that big shift. And Melanie's going to share a little bit.
And I don't know. Is this on? Oh, there we go. And so I just want to, we've touched on a few things. I just want to recap as Al Rundy. And Al, did you say what you do before you spoke?
No, I did not. I
You
think a
should
lot of people know
do
what
that.
I do.
You should do that, like really quick.
Okay, well, I work at the state government on issues in property tax and transportation. And while I have the mic here, I'll just mention that Aaron's correct that the red block you see up there that is the federal money that's going away. Sir, you should, rather than misappropriation, you should have seen that on your school property tax bills over the last 3 years. The school portion of the property tax has actually declined for most taxpayers. So that was a factor that happened there because the federal money was used on top of the revenue limit amount. Now the federal money's gone away. We need to increase our revenue limit amount to replace that federal money. And that's basically what's doing. I don't know that there's been any I'm certain there's not been any misappropriation. I don't think the state would allow that to happen.
Okay, thank you, Melanie.
So I just want to very quickly summarize the situation and point to this idea of mismanagement of funds because it's one of the biggest things that I've learned being part of this referendum engagement group. So the quick summary is that there's a cap, and this is what Al Rundy was talking about. There's a cap on the amount of property taxes that can go to schools. And this cap about over a decade ago stopped making adequate adjustments for inflation. And so right around the time they were going to need to go to referendum, and Sam talked about how in school board meetings for years, Jeff Mahoney has been saying, we're going to need to go to referendum soon, and has been giving some sort of warning, then COVID money came in and delayed that need. And so Aaron spoke to the hope that we wouldn't just be met with a cliff at the end of that. But just speaking about the potential perception of mismanagement of funds, because it just couldn't be more untrue. For one, starting in 2018, at the same time, so 2018, every year since then, except for one, the amount of our property taxes going to the schools has gone down. But at the same time, the district has flipped from short-term borrowing to building up an interest-earning surplus, and this is their fund balance. And this is what they're using to potentially to cover this deficit for this next year. This fund balance is something like $13 million. I don't know
That's
if
correct.
I got that. And this past year earned $400,000 in interest, which then goes in as part of their budget. But the projection for next year, because we're going to need to use some of that money, is that the interest earned will drop down to $200,000. This is a very fiscally responsible move to build it up in the first place. But once they get dropped to a certain point, it's about 10 million, then they have to start short-term borrowing again to pay the bills at certain points in the school year when it comes in. I also just want to say, he's answered the question about administration right off the bat, but this school board has worked so hard to keep the administration small, and that has been part of their fiscal responsibility. I know that there is one more. Darn it. I think I'll leave it there.
That's okay. Thank you. Yes, and so now I feel like I want to give you a little more information about fund balance, just so you got that. So fund balance. So fund balance, think of it as a savings account. So the way it works for a school district is we get our paycheck long after our bills are due. So our revenue comes in after our expenses. So we have to pay our expenses first. So we have to keep so much money in our savings account or we can't pay our bills. So we'd write a bad check. And so for us, in order to pay our bills, we have to have at least $10 million just sitting there waiting to pay our bills. And so we currently have, because interest has been so great, thank you, banks, we've been able to build that up to 13 million. The referendum options that was in April and all of these include using some of that fund balance to bring that down a little bit, down to that $10 million mark. So you may say, well, why don't you just keep using it? You got $10 million sitting there. Well, once you go under 10 million, then you have to go to the bank and say, hey, can you lend us some money? Because we can't pay our bills, short-term borrowing. And, of course, the bank's going to charge you for that. They're not going to say, oh, yeah, use our money. That's good. No problem. You get charged for that. So it actually costs you money. So we want to avoid short-term borrowing because once you get under 10 million, you're starting to pay. You're losing money just to pay your bills. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. So the referendum does include bringing that level down just to that point so we don't have to short-term borrow. Hope that helps with that. I'm going to take an online question, then we'll take one in the House. Why are you not talking about the nearly $1 million in additional state aid that is being provided to McFarland next year? I do have an answer to that. I don't know if you want to give it a shot, Al.
I assume that there was just an aid run that basically showed McFarland what they might get in June. It's not final yet. I think the finals come out, and Jeff could correct me, in September. October. So if that's what they're talking about, or if they're talking about the $325 per pupil that we get in additional revenue limit. Revenue limit is not state aid. Revenue limit is either state. It can be funded with either state aid or property taxes, but if more state aid isn't provided, it goes on the property tax.
Thank you. Yes. So the answer is on our Q&A because I think it's a great question. So I'll add a little bit to that. So in July, at the start of July, the state gives us preliminary aid numbers, and it's an estimate. And in all of their communication, they do an excellent job saying, this could change, don't count on this could change. For us, we estimated about a $300,000 increase. That was already part of our budgeting process. And the early numbers have that being about $1 million. So it ends up being, I guess in the numbers here, $632,000 more. Well, what does that mean? So the way that it works is revenue cap, right, which doesn't change, that's our lid, minus state aid equals your property taxes. So what that means is by state aid going up, it doesn't give the district more money, but it provides tax relief, which is so important. And so all of our estimates in all of our models were based on a $300,000 increase. And you may say, well, why don't you do the million and show us what that looks like? We are worried. If we do that and we say this is the property tax impact, if we get that $1 million, that's what you're going to count on. And then if October comes and the state says, actually, it's not that much more, you say, well, you misled us, and now it's more than you told us, and we don't want to do that. So the good news is our numbers are based on in the estimate that we projected. It could be more. And in October, what we want to do is be able to come to you and say, hey, we got more state aid. That means more tax relief for all of you, and we can celebrate that together. What that could mean, if you look at all of these referendum options, in that first year, it takes the annual increase down $100. So if it's $337 per year, it's down to $237. That's really significant. That's a significant increase, or decrease. What I would say to you, the other part of that I always remind myself, and Jeff Mahoney is thinking you better say this is only for this coming year. So you can't predict state aid out for the next year. That would just be for 2024-25 school year. So I hope that helps to kind of clarify. Like, it could be more and provide more tax relief for our taxpayers. We can't count on it until we get the final numbers because they could change. That's a very short answer. All right, in the House, Stu.
I'm curious if there's the same requirements for the two municipalities here, the village and the school, when it's required to go to a referendum? And then the second question is, what kind of collaboration, regular collaboration, has there been between the village and Town of Dunn and other than schools relative to, hey, we're squeezed in the public from the village end, from the school end, and here we sit? What kind of discussions are going on relative to that?
Yeah, I'll talk about part of that. So right now, the village does not have to go to referendum. Okay, they used to in the past. Well,
the village has to go to referendum on village has to go to referendum on operating, not capital.
Yeah, on operate. Okay. So I think because when people are talking about that, you're saying most of the village's expenses are capital, whereas most of the school's expenses are operational, right? So the village, you got to think like roads. That's probably the biggest one that we all think of. There's police and fire, so that is operational. But now I know their hot topics have been the community center and Exchange Street and the public safety center and all these large projects. So recently when people have been talking about the village going to referendum, that is what they're usually referring to, and no, they do not. The school does need to go to referendum for capital and operational. So that varies by municipality. There's different municipal laws. There's things citizens can do. There's things the board can do. But at this very moment, the village doesn't need to. No.
And in terms of collaboration, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say, you guys have monthly meetings that the municipality and the school board meet. So they are reviewing projects. If you've been paying attention lately, they've been talking about selling land for a well. So there's definitely some collaboration, but the thing that is the difference is that these are two different taxing entities. And a lot of us, when we look at our tax bill, we're seeing one line of taxes and we pay it. So that is the difference. So they're not needed to balance each other. I agree there needs to be more collaboration, and many of us have been showing up to meetings talking about that. So we would love more collaboration and more of you to show up to voice your opinion.
We've had a couple of things that have changed. Oh, sorry, you can go,
Just-
Al, and then I'll
I see
add.
Matt's here. Just to be clear, the 2016 referendum that the district did for capital improvements, school district did for capital improvements for the middle school and for the elementary school, that had to go to referendum. If that same thing was done at the village side, it would not have to go to referendum, but both have to go to referendum for this operational type increase that we're talking about here.
Yes, the village does have some other options for funding outside of just taxing entities and fees and other things.
Another thing I learned recently too is that the village and the school can't share money that's collected. So if you pay more in your village taxes and they have extra, they can't just give it to the school district. So I don't know the intricacies of that. That is a village detailed question, but I know that it isn't just one bucket of money in which we can pull from when we need it.
In terms of, Bruce, thank you.
Well, I'm not going to add probably a whole lot other than it's something that both the village and the school district is aware of. It's, Tom, I was at your house yesterday, Ellison, and he said, what is it, treat your neighbor as if you really mean it, treat your neighbor nicely, as if you really mean it. I think in some ways that's why I would look at the collaboration right now. We looked at it kind of in theory it'd be nice. I think now we're really, I guess it's been said over and over again, we have heard you loud and clear. We've got to do a better job. We're meeting more often than we used to. At one point we didn't really meet at all. So in some ways we've come a long ways, and there's a lot farther we can go.
Here we have, formally we have a joint committee meeting that has school board and village board representatives. And we've also started what Cassandra was referencing, a monthly, we're calling it kind of a strategy meeting where we get together and talk about different projects. We've worked on many joint projects together as well, saving both entities quite a bit of money. The inclusive park is a great example. That'll be on school property and used by students as well as the community, avoiding having two parks near each other. And there's other opportunities, but the collaboration needs to increase. And I think the fact that both tonight and Sunday there'll be a representative from the village willing to answer your questions after the meeting says a lot about their commitment to get that started. But it is definitely very needed. All right, I'm going to jump into another online question. It's one that I'm just going to preface. I don't feel comfortable answering because it's about my salary. So somebody else is going to have to answer this question, which, exciting. And it's an important and fair question. You talked about Aaron's pay and him freezing it, but he is actually paid high when compared to Dane County peers when considering years of experience. Have we considered lowering freezing pay for those paid high when compared to their peers in Dane County? If not, why not?
I'm happy to answer that, Aaron.
Thank
Hold
you.
on. So when an employee's pay in many industries is determined, the years of experience is a variable that a lot of organizations use to differentiate or pay people a little bit differently that do the same job. And that's very common. And it's actually really expected by us as employees when we have lots of years of experience. If we didn't earn a raise for our experience and our skill and our knowledge and our ability that we bring to the table because we've been doing it for a while, we would probably leave. So years of experience is absolutely a calculator or a variable, in addition to oftentimes education or certifications that, or transferable skills from other industries. And I'll stop being so detailed about it. But if an administrator or any employee has more years of experience, we would absolutely expect them to earn a little bit more within the appropriate range that the market, supply and demand, dictates is required for that job. So Aaron might earn more money than an entry new administrator, and we would expect that and we would hope that. Otherwise, Aaron might leave to go elsewhere. So years of experience is a very important factor in the compensation world. We all here know about that in our own lives if we work, and we would expect that to continue.
I think I'd ask the question a little bit different and say, if we don't pay Aaron what he's paid now, where could Aaron go to be hired somewhere else?
Yep, absolutely. Aaron has, and sorry, Aaron, but Aaron has a lot of transferable skills that probably relate to director level roles in private industry. So I already said that he is an HR director or serves that purpose and a communications director. I look at compensation for jobs all the time. Aaron could probably achieve those jobs and make a whole lot more money. So we need to be competitive or maintain competitiveness as best as we can with the job he's doing, but also be aware of those relatable jobs that our that employee can have, and we don't want them to leave. It's about 150% on average a cost to replace and turn over an employee. When we talk about the recruitment activities, the retention activities, and the training activities, it costs more to lose someone than to maintain someone, even if they have extensive years of experience. So from a fiscal responsibility perspective, we want to keep Aaron and all of our teachers and administrators so we don't have to also incur those expenses of recruitment and turnover, et cetera.
Just an interesting supply thing related to superintendents. So we've talked a lot about teachers. So the year that I became a superintendent and was honored to serve this district in that role, there, out of the 425 districts in the state of Wisconsin, there were over 100 new superintendents. So about a quarter of the school districts in Wisconsin that year alone had new superintendents. Most superintendents stay in a district 2 to 3 years. That's the average career expectancy. I almost said life expectancy. That would be awful. You know, and I love being here, and I'm honored to be here. I think it's a fair question. It's an important question when you look at, you know, compensation, and we need to look at those things and take those things very seriously. So thank you for the question and the responses.
Something that is relatable in a different industry that we can all think about is nurses right now. There's also a nursing shortage. If you go to the emergency department on Saturday morning, you'll probably get a recent college grad nurse. We probably want to pay that more tenured nurse that we feel confident in at the ER more than that new college grad. I hope so. They have way more experience and they will be able to assess your needs and probably save your life, probably a little bit better than that recent college grad. And we want that recent college grad to earn and gain experience so they can eventually be that really seasoned staff nurse. It's going to save your life in the ER. It's a really good crosswalk to a different industry, and I hope that it resonates.
All right, I think we're back to in the house question.
I want to thank you for having this. I had the privilege as well of teaching this district. The thing we all need to understand, and I hope everybody at home is listening, the way that schools are funded is ridiculous. It is put on to taxpayers, and it makes this hard. So now it makes the school look bad that they're asking for money, right? And I don't mean to put down the village, but we just built a $21 million safety building. Didn't have to ask anybody. $21 million, okay? We need to talk to legislators on putting 0.5% on food or clothing to pay for education, because communities can't keep doing what we're doing. But we have to keep our teachers. You can go to a lot of other districts and find out where teachers are not happy, and McFarland has lost teachers over the years. When I first came here, we were the 44th lowest paid teachers, and teachers stayed. Now teachers aren't doing that. It's going up and it's going up. We need to pass this referendum, because if we don't, we're going to lose more teachers. And right now it's hard, and even when I was going to the village meeting, I looked at my taxes. I'm like, you know, my taxes have gone up so much, so much, so much. Naive. Do you know how much my taxes have gone up in 6 years? $1,000. Only $1,000. It was stated up here quickly that the amount of money that the school district has taken has gone down. Gone down. And there's stats to show that. Unfortunately, this is the only way that we can pay for our teachers and to keep them here. And you look at the amount of money, $1,500, at the end of the 4 years, or $1,800. I feel bad for our people on fixed incomes, because that's hard. But if we don't do this, our nation, to be honest, does not value education. They say they do, politicians say they do, but they don't, because the state doesn't fund like they should. Neither does the federal government. And so it's all on us. And so now we get mad at schools when they ask for more money. What else are they going to do? They've cut 1.2 million, right? If they cut more, class size is going up. If you haven't been in a school recently, go into a Madison school or go into those other schools that have large classrooms, and I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time. You will see chaos because they don't have enough teachers, and that we need those teachers. So thank you for what you do, and please think about our children. I'm fortunate, my last daughter just graduated. I had 3 kids go through the district. I'm still going to continue to pay for education because I've got other people coming through with children. We have people with grandchildren here. So really think hard about this, everybody. Unfortunately, this is the only way we can do it right now. You got to vote, hire senators, representatives, and talk to them about how we fund schools, because this is what's going to keep happening to us, and we can't keep doing it, so we got to change something. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Online, I have a question. Thank you for this meeting and presentation. How does the total four-year estimated school tax in any of the options compare, higher, lower, similar, to those referendums that have been passed in other districts in Dane County? I do have an answer to that, but maybe one of our group members has an answer as well. Does anybody research this? Okay, that's all right. So if you look at a comparable, and I would say Monona Grove and Stoughton are 2 good comparables. Oregon, those are our neighbors, right? They're right around us. Their referendums varied in size, but they were in size compared to ours, but they were extremely close. Stoughton's being very, very close. Now, Stoughton presented their numbers in $100,000 value estimates, so you do need to do the math times 4 to get to those numbers. And theirs were, from what I recall, over $100 on $100,000 per year, and then it keeps adding up, similar to how ours does. So, very comparable. What I would caution you about, though, is what you don't know is, do they already have a referendum that is recurring underneath all of that, okay? So you might have a new one that brings you up and you're like, well, theirs was only this much. Well, because they had one 4 years ago where they actually raised it up. We had a very small, a few $100,000 operational part of the referendum in 2016. That was mostly a capital referendum. But then there was a portion of that was very small, again, that was operational. Prior to that, it was 2009 when we had our last one. So you do have to be careful about, because you don't know what existing referendums they have underneath that. But I think it's a fair question, and I think the other thing is you also, districts vary based on how much state aid they get in proportion to property taxes. We're a pretty fortunate district at about 50-50, and Al probably has more wisdom than me on that.
The other thing you got to look at when you compare among school districts is how much commercial value you have in the district. Stoughton probably, I'm guessing, and Monona Grove both have a lot higher share of their overall value, commercial value. So when we raise property taxes in the school district of McFarland, it largely falls on the home, whereas theirs gets shared with some of the commercial value that's in those school districts. So that really makes it hard to compare as well.
Aaron, just a quick note. Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel about 5 days ago came out with a list of the top referendum in the state. Arrowhead is about to vote for a $261 million facilities referendum, as well as a $7.6 million operating referendum. That would be the biggest referendum ask in state history. Before that, the second biggest would have been Madison in 2020. That was $317 million. Milwaukee Schools was 252 million. La Crosse was, they asked back in 2022 for 194 million. That one failed. The rest of them that I mentioned all passed. And I believe Madison is asking for a referendum, right, this year? Yeah, 507 million facilities referendum, 145 also facilities referendum for Franklin schools.
Yeah, I think it's like 150.
I would caution people when they read that out there that you don't add the capital and the operating referendums, because the capital is largely funded over 15 to 20 years on debt service. So you're only making a mortgage payment on that amount. You're not paying that all off.
Right. It is different. Capital and operational are different. And you know that, but I think it's best to compare operationals. And obviously the size of the district makes a big difference. If Madison goes to 100 million, well, they're significantly larger. So, I just be cautious about that. But I appreciate the question, because what the question was is talking about comparable districts to ours. And what I would say is somewhere slightly lower than what we asked in April. But when you look at where we're at right now, they're very comparable. So I think we're back to in the house. Questions in the house?
Hey, my name's Art Weber, and we do pay taxes in McFarland. We currently don't vote, but thank you all for being on this committee. And Alice hit it spot on, which I spent a decade on our CDA here in McFarland and a decade on the Zoning Board of Appeals and 20 years on the McFarland Education Foundation, and we don't have the commercial tax base here. And it's great we have a compensation specialist. I mean, you're so valuable here, and we have to work with the village. We got to learn where it's a symbiotic relationship here, and I understand maybe two separate taxes bases, but hopefully over time that's going to change a bit, because you got to ask yourself, what do you want? And what we want is a teacher, and we want them living in the community if possible. And if in CDA, we dealt with TIF money, and so many of these apartment buildings you see receive TIF money, and that's no different than what we want here in McFarland. We want to encourage that the district attracts the people here. So if we could look at a teacher decides to purchase a home and look at it like TIF money, give them a tax break during their career here in McFarland, things like that. We got to be that creative. That's what's coming down the pike. It's going to be highly competitive. So anyway, you guys know all the problems. You're going to solve them, and thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you. We do not have any more virtual questions at this point, so we'll keep going in the House.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kathy Annan. We've been here for 35 years and raised our 2 kids. Now we have 2 grandchildren, and one is in kindergarten camp.
Woohoo!
So really excited about that. And of course, we want the best teachers. We always have. Just wondering, do you think we're at a deficit by not having an HR director position? Someone who could possibly look at contracts for health insurance. I know health insurance is always extremely costly. I mean, is there any benefit there? I also have been just trying to think outside of the box and what maybe we could do. Is there a way to offer child care? I mean, you cannot get a child care spot in the community for a year in some cases. And the other thing I was wondering, on your handout, it says that you could change the number of years into a non-recurring. Have you modeled any of those yet, or is that still in the process?
Let me answer that last question first, because that's a quick answer, and then you can jump in about the HR. We haven't necessarily modeled different options, but that can be done in minutes. It's very easy. In terms of a recurring versus a non-recurring referendum, that is easy to model, because what happens is you take any of these options, and whatever the amount is at year 4, in year 5, without another referendum, that money's gone. You know, that's what that means. And so it creates a fiscal cliff later. What a recurring referendum does is just continues that money at whatever level it's at that final year. And you can do that. The district could do that. You know, what we would do if that did happen is we'd come out and be very upfront that, look, this is what we think we're going to need once this goes away. But if someone wants to elaborate on that, or HR.
I can answer a little bit of the HR question. As a teacher in the district, I'm also president of the teachers union here. So I can tell you that we do a lot of discussions and negotiations when it comes to things like health insurance and so forth. We do not have an HR director, but we do have a person on our staff who takes care of our payroll, answers our payroll questions, and we have a company that we work with every 2 to 3 years. Jeff Mahoney helps run this with our health insurance. So we do work with a company that puts it out to bid for us, negotiates, researches what is the best options for us. So it's not that we don't have any of that. We just have to hire someone to do that.
Something additionally about benefits when you go and negotiate with a broker or whatever to see what type of carrier you're going to have for health insurance, Dean versus UW Health, whatever. You also can design benefits plans to offer different options, single coverage, single plus child, family coverage, what have you. Through discussions with Jeff Mahoney, he's looked at the data as of the employees in the district and what type of coverage they have and what type of use they have. It is projected that those costs are going to go up, but what's interesting is that most of the employees in the district take family coverage, which means that they're probably holding the insurance for their family, like I think is quite stereotypical of teachers, and being that secondary income. So they're here for the benefits, the culture too, and the enjoyment that they get out of their job. But from a fiscal responsibility and attraction perspective, we've got to keep that benefits package strong. That's what they're here for. So, you can pare that down. You can move from an HMO to a PPO to a high deductible health plan. You can increase your deductibles. You can increase your maximum out-of-pocket rates. You can do all of these things. But the reality is we need to offer family coverage, and it is the most expensive kind of health insurance to purchase if you are going through a private pay instance, and it's the most expensive kind to provide as an employer also. I know Jeff is on this. He is already ready, and he's actually standing up back there if he wants to add anything. He's looked at this many different times. I've even looked at the spreadsheets, and it's complicated, and it is a large factor in that budget.
I think what we, kind of to summarize what we have done, it's been said earlier, we could definitely, benefit from more human resources support. However, what we're doing now is just existing staff are taking on that additional role and responsibility, and occasionally we use an outside consultant or a broker to help us with that. All right, we have another virtual question, and I'm going to have Jeff Mahoney come forward to answer this because it's a little, or in the back, but I'm going to ask it, and then Jeff's going to answer. Jeff Mahoney in the back is our Director of Business. It says, I've read articles from other districts spending their ESSER, that's that federal COVID relief money, on capital improvements that lowered their ongoing expenses. One in particular that many districts did in Wisconsin and nationwide was solar and or geothermal that had a rate of improvement of just 2 years. So that covered that cost. In McFarland, we pay $400,000 or more in utility costs. That has to be way better than bank interest. Why did we not spend the ESSER early on to lower our utility costs when we could have similarly paid off those expenses and netted the savings in perpetuity? Why don't we spend our surplus to lower these ongoing costs now and save the $400,000 annual cost as soon as possible? Excellent, informed question. Jeff.
Try not to drop the technology here. Now that
By the
you read
way,
the
just so
question.
you know, Jeff has been in the back monitoring these questions, so that's where he has been. He's not hiding, he's helping.
Nope, not hiding. So, ESSER funds and the options that school districts were provided. Yes, there are many school districts that were provided ESSER funds. Similar to us, it was based on formula, and districts got to make decisions about what they would spend their money on. They also had to make decisions about what did they have to spend the money on. And a lot of districts had to upgrade their HVAC systems because the state said, and the Fed said, you need to have good air quality to get through COVID. So there were a lot of districts that made capital improvements on their buildings. McFarland has a strong tradition of already improving their capital investments. So much so that each time we'd have the projects, we'd look at the returns on investments to see where could we make better choices, what could we do. A couple projects that we are in, we're doing a joint project with the village. Many people might have read about this a few years back, that we're doing a solar farm, which is going to bring savings to both the village and the school district. Most recently, we had some energy audits done on our Wabisa. We're looking at a energy capital plan in the future on that building. It's actually one of our most costly buildings for electricity. So why did the district choose not to use, again, ESSER money on capital projects? This community has already prided itself on taking care of its capital improvements over the years. That's number one. Number two is McFarland didn't have a lot of ESSER funds first provided to it. The McFarland School District was benefited by, one, having a virtual school, which when the state legislature came through with a second funding round, we were given extra funds. Two, this community made a deep investment in education during COVID to get our youngest learners into buildings. That helped us financially get us more COVID money. We were able to take and show to the state that we did have more in person, which is something that the ESSER funds were based on. So that set us up for some success, for also getting through a couple years, as Al's been pointing out, no inflationary adjustments were given. So we cognizantly, 3-4 years ago, when we were developing our 5-year budget plans, used COVID money to fund our school district for our existing staff and to manage through a difficult time. It has saved our taxpayers money, but now we've gotten to this point of where those monies, those one-time monies went away. So every district is different. There are opportunities always. We're actually met with a company called Data Wrangler last week. We're looking at how we can look at other areas of our electrical bills and areas where we can do things like avoid demand charges. And if you have not a tax bill, but electrical bill, it does feel like a tax bill every once in a while, especially if you look at the back and you see all the extra charges. There are things like demand charges. So there are things that we can do better, and we progress and we keep doing those things. So every time we can have a chance to go after something, we do. That's kind of the fun part of the job, is trying to save money in other areas, and we've done that for years.
I really appreciate that, the thoughtfulness of that question that person asked and thinking about that return on investment. I will add, we also have a high school eco club who has won an award 2 years in a row for their outstanding work. And what they do is they work with the district. They analyze our usage, our utilities, and come up with, drives, ways, suggestions for us on how we can reduce our costs. In fact, they're probably really upset right now at the amount of money we're spending just for this meeting to run it. So they actually watch the meter, and they will test things and give us advice, and resulting in their award winning. So we are looking at that. I think it's really important. We needed to use that money to pay for our existing staff.
Jeff and Aaron, I just want to add, a lot of districts statewide did use it for one-time capital improvements, but I hazard to guess, I don't know this, but they may also have gone to referendum for operations earlier because of that.
Yeah, so the idea is they didn't need that money for operations because they had already had a referendum, so they could use it for capital. There was another hand in the House.
I have first a comment and then also a question. And I just want to compliment all of you for your preparation tonight, the time that you took to inform us. I thought it was very well done, and all of you were very articulate, answered a lot of questions, and I just wanted to thank you for that. So my question is, we've talked about our state legislature and the impact on education and funding. So my question is, and I apologize if there is an answer to this and I'm just not aware of it, but is there any kind of a grassroots effort to try to appeal to the legislature to revisit and kind of address this very important topic that doesn't seem to have been addressed in time past?
I can answer if others don't have it. I don't know about any grassroots efforts. I will tell you that as administrators, school staff, we have advocated with our legislature, and we do it all the time. We are constantly talking to them about that. School boards are talking to the legislature about that. And editorialize, I just need to. We don't feel like it's resulted in any changes. We feel like all of our efforts have been ineffective, other than the $325 per student increase that we saw for this past year. And that was helpful, but it did not close that gap between what it costs to educate a child based on inflation. I will tell you, just to add this, I don't think we've talked about this. Prior to 2009, the amount of the aid or the cost per student increased every year with the cost of living. So as CPI went up, so did school funding automatically. In 2009, the legislature separated those two, and they make a decision in their budget. And we just haven't seen the legs. I know that there are advocates in the legislature who are working hard. I would say, not to get too political, but I believe our governor is one of those people, along with other local legislators. But frankly, that grassroots that you mentioned is probably going to be more powerful than the school districts doing it on their own, because that hasn't worked so far.
I can add, Kathy, that with the legislature, you may see them come in. There's a $325 increase for the next 400 years based on the governor's veto in that revenue limit. You may see the legislature come in and buy down that with aid, but that's no more resources for Jeff and Aaron. It's basically property tax relief unless they provide additional state aid over and above that $325 amount.
So the way we talk about it, and I know there's actually I got another virtual question. The way we talk about it is that the way the school funding is designed, and Eric mentioned this or kind of inferred this a little bit, it is actually, right now, the model is designed for districts to go to operational referendum, in my opinion. We know that we're not giving you enough to fund your schools, so we want this to be a local decision. We want you to go to your taxpayers and ask them for more money, with 86% of the districts in the state doing so. So I think that is where there's that challenge, and I think your thoughts on advocacy are well received. All right, a virtual question. The plans you developed in the referendum options, growing the cap year over year, creates a similar funding gap situation to what we are facing now. How are you going to keep this proactive to keep this situation from repeating? Why not go for a shorter referendum or one that does not increase year over year and puts those plans into effect sooner? Any members like to give that one a shot? I think you could. I'm going to repeat it just to give you another opportunity. The plans developed in the referendum options, growing the cap year over year, creates a similar funding gap situation to what we're facing now. How are you going to be proactive to keep this situation from repeating, excuse me? Why not go for a shorter referendum or one that does not increase year over year and put those plans into effect sooner?
I think one of the things is recurring and non-recurring is part of the factor here. If we go with a recurring referendum, those funds are continuing to come in and we can rely on fiscal responsibility from the district. But if we go with a shorter term or non-reoccurring referendum, we likely are going to be in this spot again unless something changes on a legislative level, and so we're going to have to come back and ask for more money to fund our school. So when you're thinking about a referendum, that is one of the main differences between recurring and non-recurring that we're going to have to really make very clear going forward.
School districts also, I've learned, and I know this from working with employees of all organizations that work for volatile industries, there's a lot of turnover in organizations that are volatile. They have steep increases and steep losses that are unpredictable. It's really difficult to work for and then budget yourself as an employee. So when you have an organization that has a consistent and reliable revenue stream that can be relied on from your employees, they are not going to be scared to find a new job, even if their paycheck is there today, but they know that it might not be there the next day. So from a retention perspective of employees, it's really important that they know that next year the school has cash too. Because if they don't, they'll start shopping sooner in fear that they might be laid off that next year. And that takes a long time to find a new job sometimes. Teachers probably not, but it still is a risk for the district if there is that fiscal cliff. It makes Jeff's job very hard also to forecast moving forward, right? We want to project our home budgets on what's it going to look like next year for us. What can we afford differently? Jeff's doing the same thing for the school district, and it becomes, it's not feasible to do when there's a non-reoccurring. So is a non-reoccurring the only option? If it is, I'm sure the school district will take it right now. But a reoccurring is really what's sustainable, what's going to keep staff here, and what's going to make the reputation of the McFarland School District continue to be on the positive side.
Thank you. All right. Oh, Craig's going to say something.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was mentioned this evening, but I know it has been in the past. I need for people to understand how the state financing seems to be incredibly unfair to public education. 6 of the last 10, and correct me if I'm mistaken here, anyone, but 6 of the last 10 years we've received no state aid. 0.
No increase in state.
No increases, yep. Exactly. So obviously the cost of everything continues to rise, and if we can't somehow get an increase in state aid, we'll be coming back and asking for more money year after year. Now, there's hope that the new district lines that were drawn might have an effect. There seems to be, more, I think, sympathetic views in the legislature regarding public education. I know back, I don't even know how many years ago it was, that Tommy Thompson, former governor here in Wisconsin, said, a state cannot sustain both the public education system and a charter or voucher districts. So we're caught in a real bad spot here, and I don't want to make it sound like it's excuses, but it is a reason. Yeah. And the other thing I just wanted to get out is that it's difficult for a board whose real responsibilities are relatively few. It's to make policy and make sure it's followed, and to be fiscally responsible. And we struggle knowing that a non-recurring or extremely low referendum is not the fiscally responsible thing to do. However, that it's more important that we not fail another referendum. So it's a tough decision, and there are going to be a lot of tough decisions to be made moving forward. But that one is sticking in our craw a little bit. But we're going to do what we need to do to have the same school district that I enjoyed and that my children enjoyed, and now my grandchildren are working their way through. So we need to keep what we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Recognizing it is 8:30, so if people leave, we won't be offended, but we're going to keep answering those questions. One of the things I notice I keep doing, and I feel my budget people wanting to correct me, when we talk about the state not increasing aid, a reminder, state aid doesn't increase our budget. When we add the per pupil spending, that $325, that does. State aid decreases taxes. It provides tax relief. So I just want to, did I say that right?
That's, I think if state aid would provide more than the 325.
Yes,
it could cover the
yes.
cost. And also there's categorical, there's several, Jeff knows this better than me, but there's several categorical aids that are outside the revenue limit formula.
Yep. I just want to be careful because sometimes you hear legislatures say, we just gave all this money to schools. Well, you gave it in tax relief. You didn't give it to the revenue. All right, in-house. Anybody have another question in-house? And for those of you who are leaving, thanks for being here. You can watch the rest online when you get home.
Hi, my name is Mike Sweeney. I've lived here over 35 years, and my 3 kids have gone to school, and now I've got 5 grandkids that are going to be going to school here. So we've been talking about big numbers here. From your perspective, I would like to challenge the people in this district to take a look at tightening their budget in one little spot. And an example would be if you spend $5 on a cup of coffee every day, multiply that to a whole year, you're going to be about $1,300. So it isn't just what you guys are doing, it's what we got to do at home. And I understand the challenges that we're facing. But really, this is a very, very wealthy community. I understand there's some people that are on fixed incomes, but I'm on a fixed income. We take a look at our budget every year, and we make sacrifices where we have luxuries that we really don't need. That's my comment.
Thank you. We have an online question here. I'm going to read the whole thing. So there's a nice introduction and then a thoughtful question. All of the options on the survey are pretty expensive and a big ask for our family. But we recognize the need, support schools, and will almost certainly support a referendum. But these options puzzle me. I noticed the highest option costs only $60 more annually and costs $240 more by the end of the 4 years compared to the lowest, when the difference in impact is that the highest keeps current staff and improves competitiveness, while the lowest cuts 20 to 25 more teachers and lets us fall even further behind in below average on pay. My first question would have been, can this be correct? Can $60 more per year on our property taxes from option 1 to option 3 make that big of a difference? But I've already asked, and you say yes. So does anyone care to answer that? But the impact of well, it's not as much on your taxes from 1 to 3, it has a huge impact. How can that be?
Yes, I mean, it's $60 to each individual household, but if you think about how many households are in town, that adds up over time. It's like simple crowdfunding, where people are like, if everyone donates $5, we can have this, help this person save their home or pay their, medical bills or things like that. And each person's only donating a small amount. It's that same concept, but on a larger scale because it's the entire school district, which is parts of 6 different municipalities all pitching in an extra $60. So it does add up to make a significant difference.
I did some quick math. $60 a month times 12 months is $720 a year. If there's 100 people listening tonight, that's $72,000 annually. That's one teacher. There's not a lot of people in this room. Doesn't take long to exponentially snowball the amount of money that this community can commit and pool together to make that gap happen. So if $720 a year times just these people, we get to keep a teacher. So that's 1/35 of the gap already, just by that many people.
I would add, I think we're all getting a little tired, but I'll add to this and then we'll take another in-house question. They also contributed something else to the question, which I think is more of a statement than a question, but I want to make sure we reflect this person's comments. Why would the district ask us to increase taxes by $380 per year for option 1 when it basically risks letting our schools fall apart? When bumping it $60 more per year to $440 per year keeps us pretty close to what we have. The options are so close in cost and miles apart in impact. How is option one responsible or viable? I think that was a question. And you could see the survey results that a significant percentage of our community were supportive of one more than the other, but I appreciate their comment and wanted to reflect that. All right, in the House, what do we have?
Hi, my name is Pat Dietrich. I am not a community member. I actually grew up in the east side of Madison, but my job, and the reason I'm attending here tonight, is to actually attend meetings just like this all over the state. I work for a company, and we help school districts with long-range planning for capital maintenance. As Jeff said, you guys do a wonderful job of that, and it shows when I come here. I also want to say that I'm here because I found this information online, and that's a tip of the cap to the people up on the stage and everyone who put efforts together to get this meeting out to the public. Because when I go to these meetings all over the state, it's like 5 or 7 people in the room. And when I counted at one point, there were about like 50, 55 people in here, not including those on stage. So the community involvement y'all have here is incredible. There's conversation back and forth, and it's really, really good. To Aaron's point, though, the state system currently right now, the way I see it and what I see the trends going on in work right now, what I do is set up for communities to go to referendum. And it's so unfair for school administrators to have to come to the community with their hands out and be forced to go to referendum. If you look back at the results, I think 93 districts went to referendum in April and February with record-setting amounts. We just heard from you about the record-setting amounts again that are going to be asked this time around. Now, when we look back at the statistical data on referendums from the years like 2000 to 2010, we're talking like 50% of referendums passed. And when we talk about even further into like the 2018, you saw a huge spike of like 90% of referendums getting passed. And that's this huge number. And then there was this frenzy of, well, people are handing out money and communities are saying yes, just like that. And now we're seeing, because of inflation increases and all these other things that are happening, these yes approvals are dropping to about 40%, and yet the schools are still the ones that are carrying the bucket on it, and they're the ones who are incurring the cost, cutting millions of dollars out of their budgets, and it's really unfortunate. I'm hoping that I can offer some perspective that this isn't just a McFarland issue, that this is a statewide issue. And yes, there does need to be legislation passed. There needs to be more state aid and help in ways that help school districts directly, because it's really not fair to you guys to have to even put a meeting like this together. And the fact that you guys do and you engage your community in this way, I have to say I've gone to hundreds of these, and this is a very, very well-engaged community, so my hat's off to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Don't take that for granted. That's really important. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. We have another one online. If you do another referendum and it fails, is there a waiting period before you can come back to taxpayers? If so, what is the waiting period? I'll just answer that quickly. That's a quick answer. Schools can only go for a referendum, whether it's capital or operational, at a general election. So you can't hold a special election just for that purpose. School districts can have no more than 2 referendum questions in a given calendar year. So I believe that if we were to go in November, let's say, and that fails, I believe the first Tuesday in April is April 1st, I think. So that means we could actually not have an April question if we have a November question, because then we would have had 2 questions within a calendar year. So we'd have to wait till the next following general election. I think I got that right. I see head nods. So, that is a risk that certainly the district would be taking if they chose to go in November, is that we'd have to wait and couldn't go in April. All right, in-house, for our dwindling, probably tired and hungry crowd.
Hi, thank you again. First, I want to say I graduated McFarland High School in 1978.
Nice.
But my wife did something the other day that helped us understand the need, and I would encourage anybody to do it, and it was simply pulling out our tax bill for the last 5 years. And it's right there in black and white. You can see that the school district was getting less and less and less every year. So I encourage people to do that for a visual of their own. My question is, on this recurring and non-recurring issue, is that something that the board will do or decide they want to ask for before the referendum? Or would that be part of the referendum to ask if it should be reoccurring or not?
Thank you.
Yes, that's part of the question. So the question is what appears on the ballot, and the question will signify if it is recurring or non-recurring.
So we have actually taken, and somebody asked that if we've modeled out, we do actually have draft questions in the event. For each of the 3 options, we had drafted those questions. That's something we've shared publicly, but we have those both in recurring and non-recurring language. So what it basically says is, for recurring purposes or non-recurring purposes, and it talks about how it would build each year. So that decision would need to be made prior to August 27th for a November question.
Can I just add that is why we're here. We did the survey with all recurring, and we're here to have open communication to figure out what that sweet spot is. But eventually, yes, we have to make a decision, and that would be the school board making that decision.
And I'll add a little bit about the decision to use all recurring questions, because this question has been asked, and it's a good question, and it was a hard decision. The reason why we chose to do all recurring is for 2 reasons. First of all, as you've heard, a recurring referendum provides some stability to the district. That's why the district made the choice to do that in April. But we also recognize what people are saying, is that they're just concerned about agreeing to something forever. We felt that by putting 3 recurring questions on, one, to do a recurring and a non-recurring on a survey would be very confusing for people. And we were worried that that would confuse people and we couldn't trust the results. The second thing is this. With 3 recurring questions on the survey, if the board chose to make those non-recurring, we feel that the results on the survey would be reliable and maybe only increase, meaning those people that would support a recurring referendum are likely to also support a non-recurring referendum, and maybe some more people who would not support a recurring referendum might support a non-recurring referendum. Had we had the questions be non-recurring, the district would not have had the option to go to recurring because the results would be kind of thrown out. So we don't really know how much lower they would go. We anticipate they would be lower. That's what the data shows. But we wouldn't know how much for those 2. So that's why we chose to do 3 recurring questions, and that could change in the final question. Okay. I don't have any more questions online. Anybody else in the house? Thank you, Mr. Hickey. This is called teacher wait time. So know that we're here, we're available. We will not be offended if you come back on Sunday night. We will not be offended if you tell all your friends to come back on Sunday night. Please check out our website. Please come and tell us. And please fill out the exit survey, that exit slip. It's 2-sided. You can either fill it out now, maybe you already have, and leave it with us, or it is on our website, or you can drop it off at any of our schools and they'll get it to us. That helps us know where you're at after hearing this information. So it is also on our website, so you could fill it out on there as well. So thank you everybody so much. Thanks for sticking around so long. We really appreciate you. Have a great rest of your evening, and go Spartans.